What does the term profound autism mean to you? Because I'm sure we're all profoundly confused about this one. Get it? No? Okay, tough crowd. Hey friends, I'm Mike, a late identified autistic adult, and today we're going to be talking about profound autism, a new term for the most vulnerable autistic people, apparently. Or is it just a rebranding of the term low functioning? Let's dive in. What do people think profound autism is? Kaelynn Partlow's recent video on profound autism was shared on my Discord server recently. If you don't know, Kaelynn Partlow is an autism advocate and therapist, recently defined profound autism as requiring 24/7 supervision, being non-speaking or minimally speaking, and having an IQ below 50. She shared that while the term brings clarity for some people, it focuses on deficits and risks and harm for others. Fair enough.
Is profound autism a real thing, and is that term even useful? Well, today we're gonna argue about it. To be clear, I'm gonna offer some thoughts in a non-confrontational way, and some of you are gonna lose your minds in the comment section, regardless of what I say next. So here's the proposed definition. Profound autism is a distinction, meaning that an autistic person requires 24-hour supervision to stay alive, is non-speaking or minimally speaking, and has an IQ less than 50. People who are against it say it focuses on deficits. The term could be used to justify harmful practices and overly restrictive environments, and it may result in reduced access to support, as many organizations won't provide services to folks with high support needs. People who are for it say it's about clarity. Folks with high support needs face unique, unseen, and sometimes devastating challenges that require solutions. Having a specific term creates opportunities for better oversight and accountability in communities and in services. Lastly, it opens the door to making autism research more inclusive. No matter your perspective, it's a step in the right direction that we're even having these debates, because it means we're finally acknowledging the existence of folks whose autism prevents them from participating in online advocacy.
It's what a lot of people believe, but I don't agree entirely with Kaelynn. Don't lose your minds in the comment section. I like Kaelynn and I think her content is great. And like people in my family do, she works with high support needs autistic people who need constant supervision for one reason or another. But I think that Kaelynn's made a mistake in the definition of profound autism and why the term was proposed in the first place, because it doesn't mean what you might think it means. I was certainly surprised too. Where did the term profound autism come from? The term profound autism was proposed by the Lancet Commission in 2021 in a lengthy opinion piece about the future of care and clinical research in autism. It's a 52-page document which aims to, in their own words, answer the question of what can be done in the next 5 years to address the current needs of autistic individuals and families worldwide, acknowledging that there are at least 78 million autistic people worldwide, and the majority do not receive any sort of support. The document's language is a little mixed, as you might expect, from a document written by a committee of like 32 authors, sometimes referring to autism as a disorder and sometimes as a condition. The report is written about us rather than by us, and is mostly written using person-first rather than identity-first language, so person with autism rather than autistic person, that many autistic adults prefer. While we're here, digging into the language, this report also uses co-occurring instead of comorbidity. For instance, co-occurring intellectual disability or co-occurring epilepsy. What is the argument for profound autism as a term? The paper argues the point that between around the 1950s and 1990s, most children and adults receiving an autism diagnosis also had co-occurring intellectual disabilities, and that culturally, autism was understood to involve intellectual disability. However, we know from recent studies into the prevalence of autism in high-income countries that most children receiving a new autism diagnosis do not have a co-occurring intellectual disability. So we have a split. Those without intellectual disability who can communicate their needs, and those who require family members to communicate their needs to policymakers, media, medical professionals, and the scientific community, as the report says. This differentiation delineates those who are at the highest risk of institutional abuse and maltreatment. But note that the report, talking about severely affected individuals and less severely affected autistic people, is actually talking about intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities in the UK and not autism. Does that make sense? It doesn't really, does it? Profound autism is not proposed as a diagnostic term. So if the proposals are accepted by the American Psychiatric Association, who published the DSM when the next release drops, and the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization, who published the ICD, you won't see any profound autism on any diagnosis. Yet. Maybe. We're still all talking about it. Profound autism is described as, quote, requiring 24-hour access to an adult who can care for them if concerns arise, being unable to be left completely alone in a residence, and not being able to take care of their most basic daily adaptive needs. In most cases, these needs will be associated with a substantial intellectual disability. Example, an intelligence quotient below 50. That means not always, but still. A very limited language, e.g. limited ability to communicate to a stranger using comprehensible sentences. I'm struggling with that at the moment. Or both. To represent the intensity of needs in a standard manner, profound autism is thus defined not by autistic features, they say, but by intellectual or language disability. Hold the press, I'll say that again for those at the back. Profound autism is thus defined not by autistic features, but by intellectual or language disability. So, to fill in the attention gap, due to those who are generally later diagnosed, since it's extraordinarily rare for an autistic person in assisted living residential support services to have not received an autism diagnosis yet, who are more vulnerable because of something else, and not necessarily because of their autism, we need a new term so that they can get more attention. You can read it for yourself, link in the description, but that's basically what's being proposed. Part of this attention is genetic research, which is generally disapproved of by autistic adults and has been framed as having eugenicist overtones. The report states that, despite genetic studies that have the greatest implications for the more severely affected individuals, many other areas of research have focused on less severely affected autistic people. The report hints at a desire to focus on genetic studies, which some see as a slippery slope. Many autistic adults view these studies as harmful, fearing that they could lead to eugenics-like outcomes, as we saw with the controversial Spectrum 10K project.
A few years ago, a study was launched with the aim to collect genetic samples and environmental data from 10,000 autistic people. The stated intentions behind the study were to advance knowledge and support, but this study was eventually paused due to backlash from the autism community. Autistic adults argued that the study's focus on genetic data could lead to eugenics-like outcomes. I mean, especially if this study is successful, it could provide the building blocks for an in vitro test for autism. The study did not include autistic voices in its design in any meaningful way.
If you missed my video on that, check the description for a full breakdown. And if you're enjoying this video and you aren't yet subscribed, please stim the subscribe button and like the video. It really helps me to reach more people. Thank you for those of you who do. Return of functioning labels. Now, I generally don't have to look far to see functioning labels, even in the comments sections of my own videos, and these are often from parents of autistic children who have some co-occurring conditions, such as intellectual disability. A common theme is that they're frustrated by autistic adults like myself on YouTube and other social media, advocating for themselves and for other late identified autistic adults who have thought themselves broken their whole lives. It's as though people like me might be somehow taking away the magical autism resources and attention from those autists who have significantly greater intellectual disabilities, who live in supported residential services or are supported by their families 24/7. And this couldn't be further from the truth. But on this channel, I give my experience and discuss the science, and that is all any of us can do. The autism differences between me and somebody living in residential supported services are actually not that much different from a mechanism point of view. This is why in the United States, the DSM-5 widened the scope of the autism spectrum conditions to encompass the separate conditions of Asperger's, PDD-NOS, and so on into just one umbrella. There is no scientific evidence to differentiate the underlying autism condition. Now, this criticism has its own issues in that by somebody contrasting me with somebody in residential support services as though I am high functioning and that they are low functioning implies that I have no support requirements and makes light of my own daily challenges, whereas someone who is low functioning also has the implied low expectations. You know, they'll never amount to much, that sort of thing. Where I live compared to Kaylynn's earlier comment,
because it means we're finally acknowledging the existence of folks whose autism prevents them from participating in online advocacy.
Autistic service users here are not prevented from using the internet and can, and sometimes do, advocate for themselves using social media. even ones who require the assistance of adults or social care services. So it isn't so clear-cut as that. Moving on, sometimes people will use level 3 autism as though this is the final boss of autism, and level 1 autism as though it's the fluffy, cutesy first round of Super Mario World. It's as though level 3 means they can cast higher level spells or something. Now, most of the world outside of America don't actually use the level system to describe autistic support needs at all. It was introduced into the DSM-5 as a way to explain support needs. DSM labels these as 1, requiring support, 2, requiring substantial support, and 3, requiring very substantial support. The ICD-11, used by the rest of the world, doesn't use levels, possibly because the level of support that you need as an autistic person isn't going to be fixed, but will change depending on the context. You might have lower support needs at home, but substantial support needed when traveling, for instance. Now, I don't actually have a level on my paperwork. I was never given one. Instead, I have documents evidencing my support needs. If I were to reduce the 1,000 or so words down to a single freedom digit for the US DSM, I'd probably be a level 1. But sometimes I'm closer to a 2. And in a residential support setting, if I were there, being in a home that I can't control, constant chattering and noises from other people, lights, the temperature being too hot, unable to have my independence and feeling a loss of myself, constant meltdowns, I would be a level 3, no doubt about it. So the folks at places like Autism Speaks have a long-standing culture of wanting to force a separation between actually autistic adults and the parents of autistic children. It's not even an us versus them situation. We should all be on the same side. But even autistic adults existing just seems to be a problem for them. We can exist, but we have to be shuffled off into a different label, bringing back the Asperger's label, perhaps. It has been argued at length online. 2 weeks ago, the director of social media for Autism Speaks, Eileen Lamb, posted on her personal Facebook page, "Upcoming rant about the erasure of profound autism." There's no erasure, Eileen. The term isn't actually officially adopted. Anyway, moving on. Self-advocates, that's me, speaking over those with the higher support needs and the social model of disability. I'm sorry, has she been drinking too much Christmas sherry? How do you speak over the social model of disability, yet alone those with the higher support needs? On Christmas Day, I received hundreds of negative comments calling me a horrible mother, ableist, abusive, disgusting, you name it. I was it, she says. Quick pause. Who's sending Eileen Lamb hundreds of negative comments on Christmas Day? What on earth? Was this like in the comment section of a TikTok or something? It's hard to move on the internet without receiving abuse. I get it. My friends get it. It's a horrible hazard of doing business on the internet. And that's why we shouldn't post private videos of our children online and open them up to this sort of thing, which I think is what Eileen might have done. Why? Because I shared a video of Jude on his 6th birthday saying he wished Charlie didn't have autism. A 6-year-old wishing his brother could play with him and talk to him instead of hitting him or destroying his toys. Autism, at least for those with level 3 autism, isn't the quirky genius of Sheldon or the good doctor. It's not about thinking differently. It's 24/7 care, aggressive behaviours, self-injury, meltdowns, destruction, and heartbreaking limitations in communication. I'm tired of certain segments of people online trying to carve out little squares of autism for themselves, holding on to them like Smeagol and his Precious. Nobody's saying Sheldon or the good doctor or any similar characters are good representations of what it's like to be autistic. The entire autism community struggles with this, and nobody is advocating for thinking differently, like an Apple advert. Although autism is a complex neurodevelopmental condition that does change the way you think and perceive the world. It isn't always 24/7 care and aggressive behaviours, and it's misleading to say that it is, frankly. She continues, "It's Charlie swallowing screws, breaking his brother's toys and smearing poo on the walls," she continues. "The comments are insisting that if society were more accommodating and understanding, then everything would be fine, and that therefore autism isn't a disability. Guess what? That's BS. The most accessible, disability-friendly world wouldn't suddenly allow Charlie to talk or play with Jude. It wouldn't erase his need for 24/7 support or stop him from engaging in destructive and self-harming behaviours." In last week's video, I talked about my mum, who's currently in hospital, and at Christmas we went to a restaurant that said it would be fine. She's a wheelchair user, it would be fine. Said that would be fine. This is the only route that the restaurant has for wheelchair users. On that afternoon, it wasn't her physical disabilities that disabled her, but the thoughtless design, bad joinery of the building, which had only recently been refitted. That doesn't mean, in a perfect world,
she isn't a disabled person with high daily support needs, but that she's been somewhat embarrassingly disabled by the venue.
Eileen continues, the social model of disability, sure, it works for some, but for Charlie and countless others with profound autism, it's a cruel oversimplification that ignores their reality. Eileen goes on to say that she's fueled by hate, which I think might be true, and it's a shame, frankly. And her Facebook post has over 300 effusively positive, encouraging comments that I genuinely hope makes Eileen feel better. It sounds like Charlie needs that constant adult supervision and that he should get it. I doubt anyone is saying that he shouldn't. But for Charlie and countless others with profound autism is somewhat misleading because Charlie doesn't have profound autism. He can't because A, profound autism is not and was never intended to be a diagnosis, and B, profound autism means an autistic person with severe intellectual disabilities. It's intellectual disabilities, not autism. Strange name, I know. And C, Charlie's 6, right? The Lancet says the term profound autism is not appropriate for young children. It might begin to be useful with the consent and participation of families from early school age. Example, from the age of 8 years for children with autism and severe to profound intellectual disability or minimal language, given the evidence that these factors are not likely to change. He's too young to use that label, and the Lancet warn against this as his early years developmental trajectory is still ongoing. Because the term profound autism relates to a flag, it's a marker that distinguishes a child within administrative systems for the purposes of prioritizing research on them, for the purposes of research prioritization. But what it doesn't do is inform any sort of assistance or therapies or supports, other than saying to people, this person needs 24-hour safety supervision, a bit like a badge. What about people needing 24-hour safety supervision who aren't autistic? Because profound autism doesn't mean autism, it just means severe and intellectual disabilities or possibly communication difficulties. Some people in the Lancet dataset qualifying for profound autism were actually in employment, even though they needed continuous support. So profound autism doesn't even mean that somebody won't be able to have a job. How profound is it, really? So the Lancet argues that because of the increase of new diagnoses without intellectual disabilities, that a label is needed to reorient research priorities onto autistic people with severe intellectual disabilities. Completely missing the point, the vast majority of the body of research currently is performed on datasets of autistic people with co-occurring intellectual disabilities because the diagnoses were biased towards those in supervised care over the last few decades. And that's likely the reason behind the false belief that autistic people are somehow less intelligent than the general population. We're not, and I talked about this in detail in my video on IQ and autism, and why autism is often confused for Down syndrome. It's a Google trend. And this isn't to cast any shade on a low IQ number. That's not the only type of intelligence there is. But it's that type that the profound autism label is intended to capture. And maybe it's my own autism here, but that really bothers me. In online spaces, are you autistic or acoustic is used as a derogatory label for somebody doing or saying something unintelligent. And closely behind that is the R slur, all because of the focus that society has on autistic people having co-occurring intellectual disabilities. And anyone else? Well, you simply don't look autistic, or you're just quirky or thinking differently and you don't have the real autism TM. It's also, as Eileen Lamb demonstrates, another source of conflict. It's another label to fight over, which means another potential division. The first ever diagnosed autistic person worked as a banker and had a degree in foreign language. It's French. He was American, and he was assessed by none other than the Leo Kanner, the very same who hosted a travelling scientist who had worked in Hans Asperger's Vienna clinic. There was not a presumption of general intellectual disability when thinking about autism then. Yet at some point, mostly in the United States, and now very robustly argued by the likes of Autism Speaks and their agents and employees, you only seem to be a valid autistic person if you also have severe intellectual disabilities or smear poo on the walls. And this brings me to the new speaking over term, which is used to imply that somebody who's autistic and able to use the internet, because the speech we're talking about here are articles and comments on social media and the like, is somehow taking away from other people who need something more. I've uploaded a video, therefore someone else can't. And to me, as an autism content creator, when I hear you're speaking over people, it's as meaningless a phrase as, I don't like what you're saying, shut up, which is ironic coming from supporters of a charity with Speaks in its name. It feels to me like profound is already being used as a rebrand of the term low functioning. And let's not forget that there are also autistic people who speak and have higher IQs, but also require round-the-clock care. And they wouldn't fit the criteria for profound autism, even though I'd argue their autism really is profound. And they'd also simply be missed in the research, simply because they don't fit the criteria correctly. Co-occurring disabilities such as EDS, epilepsy, GI issues, anxiety, ADHD, sensory processing disorders, sleep disorders, depression, bipolar disorder, OCD, and dyspraxia can all significantly impact daily functioning and support needs, and none of them are included in the definition for profound autism. Despite co-occurring with autism and sometimes being very disabling in themselves, yet alone together, saying profound autism doesn't give any actual specificity to actually help someone. It doesn't mean anything. Some people do see value in the term, but it feels to me, and I stress this is my subjective take, that those saying profound autism loudly and clearly are the same who would use low functioning just as loudly in the past to describe the same population of autistic people of whom society holds very low expectations and require high supervision needs. And despite these concerns, some people see value in the term. And by focusing on those with the most significant needs, it might push for more tailored services and advocacy. But can we achieve that without the drawbacks? Personally, I don't think so, and I'm okay with that. Labelling other people for the purposes of administrative ease doesn't tell you anything more about that person. I'm a non-stamp collector. Now that you know that about me, it doesn't tell you anything about who I am, what my support needs are, what my values are. And for those rejecting the label, which, let's be honest, it's never gone well, labelling a group without being part of the said group, how will they be included or not in the studies going forward? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm sure you possibly already have. If I'm calling you out, let me know. Let me know. You've left a comment. You obviously haven't seen the video, because if you've gotten this far without exploding, well done. Give yourself a high five and drop the word hydrate in the comments below. Anyone breaking the rules will be forced to clean out Hydra's litter tray, so keep it kind and constructive, please. I agree with Kaelynn, and the fact that we're having this conversation does show progress. But to get the fuller picture, watch this video next on autism and IQ. It explains something really important about the autism spectrum even the biggest intellectual disability organisations are still getting wrong. Bye for now.